And now's the time to sort of go, well, how do I get really good at flaring low? If I'm in that scenario, what is the most effective way to do that? The first thing that I find really helps people is to bring your hands down a little bit by, let's say, 100 feet off the ground, to the point where you feel the tension on your brake lines, right? So we're all taught, right from the beginning, make sure your hands are all the way up, otherwise you won't get a good flare. It's not true. You can flare from a little bit of brakes, and I'm not saying that you should be in brakes, but to take up the slack allows for an immediate flare response. How far down do I need to put my hands where I feel the tension on the brakes, and then I verify visually, look at the back of the parachute and see what it would be, maybe too much brakes. Right. So you don't want to be, as we say, grabbing ass a little bit, because too deep into that, could rob you of a little bit of flare power, not much. So that's the first thought. The second thought is the flare response has to do with the airspeed that you're carrying, the stability of your, the dynamic aspect of your. So in other words, if you're coming out of a surge, the lines get slack, you lose some weight, you lose G's, because the lift has gone away due to this reduced angle of attack, right? And that happens before the flare all the time. It's not wrong, it's normal. Right. Because when you get down closer to the ground, there's more mechanical turbulence from trees, even stuff that's further up the wind line than you think could influence you. Surprisingly, it will. And that lack of drag causes the surge. And so you kind of have to expect that you might need to do a pitch maintenance application of the brakes prior to the flare. Does it make sense when I word it that way? Right. So yeah. Pitch maintenance is basically, where is my canopy over my head? If the canopy goes in front of me, if I apply brakes, it'll return to center. If the canopy goes behind me, if I lift my hands, if I have any brakes on, that'll return it to center. And it's a dynamic thing. So I can add and reduce in a way that, let's say after a stall recovery, the canopy wants to dive at the ground and you force it, out of that dive before its natural recovery arc would settle it, you can settle it down way sooner. And if you explore, not just stall recovery, but just brake recovery, you're inducing a surge deliberately up high, and then force that canopy back to center and recognize that it's not done. That when you force it back, there's still dynamics where the canopy is going to want to now go too far back. And then as it's going back, you lift your hands. And as it starts to recover again, you add the brakes again. So it could be several cycles to settle out that surge and flare, or whatever you want to call the positive pitch change. And so to drill that is really helpful. To recognize your weight when you're on final, to feel that forward tip and not think, well, I have to wait until the right altitude to start pulling my brakes down. No, you can be at 50 feet. It's too soon to quote flare, but it's not too soon for a pitch maintenance, cycle of the hands stopping the surge and then settling it out. And now you're maintaining your G's. You're maintaining 1 G in preparation for the flare. So that is going to be really, really helpful. The third concept that seems to help here is to get more confident with aggressive, small downward bursts on the brakes, right? A short one. And I can't say how short because I don't know your canopy. You still have to be ready for that aggression. I call it a microaggression, right? And so wherever you are in the flare process, when it's time to level off completely, you got to quicken up the pace. And one of the common traps I see a lot is people equate a lot of brakes with a lot of pitch change. And that's not actually true. If you add the brakes very slowly, you won't have a significant pitch change. And that's not actually a flare. That's a braking maneuver that slows your speed, but it doesn't change your direction of flight. It doesn't actually cause the level off that you want. So on the next one, and in the process of sort of leading up to the next jump, I want you to visualize that sharpening, and not in front of you, right? Down the sides of your body. And that does a bunch of things. One of which is it gives you more physical power. You know, it's not just triceps, it's kind of your whole body that's leaning into it. And if you're leaning forward towards your loosened chest strap, then you're going to be more upright. And if you do tag the ground, the PLF occurs easier. You know, if you push in front of you in panic, as a lot of people do when they flare low, their feet swing out in front, and then you can, you know, possibly really hurt yourself, you know, hitting your ass first. And so that part of that process is flaring sharply and bringing the feet back as you do it, right?
Okay.
So the feet come back underneath your body and lift your knees as you do it. Get small into a cannonball.
Yeah.
So low flares are really common. Don't feel alone, you know, in this state, you know. I mean, really visualize, you know, all of these literally thousands of people who have flared low, thousands. And so your job now is to be really good at low flares. Not that you want to need it, but sometimes you get a downdraft. You know, sometimes you get the surge, sometimes you get distracted. I've done all of those. You know, and just to have that physical behavior pattern rehearsed, physically rehearsed, not, I mean, visually, yeah, absolutely, see it in your mind, but also engage your body as you rehearse sitting in a chair. You know, I'm not just going to add a lot of breaks, you know, a lot slowly will not pull me out of the dive as quickly as a really powerful short downward burst. There is such a thing as too little, you know, 2 inches of a burst isn't going to level you off really. But an aggressive 2 inches would actually be more effective than 12 inches of slow. Consider how that's going to affect things is going to help. To physically rehearse it is going to help. In the last piece that immediately comes to mind is to address the fact that you have an amygdala, you have a hypothalamus, you have an adrenaline system that is predisposing you to do certain things. And they're not all, actually, most of them are not appropriate. They're not helpful. Yeah. This is old basic, you know, my monkey mind that causes me to want to attack and retreat and hide, which is freeze. And it's the freezing response that I find myself fighting in skydiving more than the others, you know, the tendency to hesitate when I need to act. And what takes away some of the gap between knowing what you need to do and doing what you need to do, you know, that gap is rehearsal. You knew that, you know, to physically rehearse low flare method, which is sharp input. And then when you give that sharp input, you are likely to give too much, right? You're way more likely to give, you know, a sharp input that causes a climb and then secondary effects that you don't necessarily want, but you got to deal with them. Right. My guess is they did not tell you that it's okay to lift your hands briefly when you overflare. They didn't teach me that. That when you know, if you've got a lot of airspeed and or you add too much brakes too sharply, the climb is natural, but you don't have to let it climb. So as soon as you feel that extra lift, the extra weight is the indication of that lift, and you feel like it's about to climb, you just say, nope, right? So it looks like off, on, right? Okay. So it's too much off, on. And it's not off and wait for a while and then hit them again. It's too late by then, and the canopy will have surged. So it's basically the same skill that we're talking about in terms of surge protection. You know what I mean? So yeah. This is your surge protector is applying the brakes, that timely addressing of the pitch change. But in this case, you induce the pitch change by too much angle of attack in too short a period of time. And it's going to make you want to go up, but instead of going up, now because you're doing this maneuver, just one, it's not lots of this. It's this off, on, and then smoothly into the completion. That'll cause you to start to go up and not go up. It'll, you know, you'll overload, you know, you'll feel the weight gain in excess of what you're normally experiencing in a flare. And that's your indication from your ass, you know, from your weight gain, that this is, I need to immediately get off of it, like you touched the hot stove.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, you're going to touch it again after.
Right.
It's on, off, right? So it's off, on, and then, you know, and that's something, again, just like the low flare counts on it. I think it's a good idea to practice over flaring the canopy. Like actually hit it so sharply right from the get-go, or from wherever your hands happen to be. You hit it until you feel the weight gain excessively so, and then don't let it climb, with this reduction of the angle of attack in this brief opportunity for you to fix it. But it's enough time. It is enough time to fix that. So these are the first thoughts that I have. Do what you gotta do. That's what the pilot does. Even if it's scary, you just do what you gotta do. Because being scared is part of it, but feeling bad about being afraid is not. It's just a matter of accepting yourself exactly as you are in this particular emotion and go, yeah, I'm freaking nervous. I was just talking to this lovely old lady on the flight from Baltimore up to Boston here, and she was like, 20 years ago, I did this team building exercise where we did this. What do they call that? The zip line.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady's like pushing, he's just pushing 80, but cool chick. And she was like, I got up there and they're so high up and the zip line was so long. And I looked at the guy and said, I just want you to know, I am scared out of my mind. He said, don't worry, you'll be fine. You know, I'll push you if you need to. She said, good, you just go ahead and push me if you need to. And she did it.
Yeah.
And I said, I commend you because you accepted the fact that you were afraid. You admitted it. And that's what begins to deconstruct the thought process of, I'm afraid, I shouldn't be afraid. And therefore, there's this added layer of heaviness. It's like, yeah, I'm nervous. So what?
Yeah.
Fear doesn't kill you.
Down the hill, towards the target, onto the rears. I love my job.